Greetings, terrestrials. Greetings, Stephen Coon. Let's get that graphic off of the screen. Greetings, terrestrials, and welcome. Welcome, one and all, to your favorite Thursday night program, the time of the week where you tune in to figure out what the heck is going on in the world. Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. I, of course, Cliff McCallister, the czar of the bizarre. Every week on this program, we take your calls to find out what strange and bizarre things are happening in the world, what things you can't quite explain. We take your calls to learn just exactly what is troubling you. Is it specters? Is it extraterrestrials? Is it interdimensional beings? But not this week. No. This week's a little different. This week, the conclusion, the thrilling finale of our 4-part bi-weekly true crime series, Who Killed Marilyn? That's right. Every other week for the past 8 weeks, we have been delving in to the mysteries of who murdered the beautiful sex goddess Marilyn Monroe. Right here on the program, we've been going 2 chapters every installment, and we've now reached the end of our journey. Tonight, we look into this book, and we find out just who it was who killed Marilyn Monroe. We put it to rest tonight. After tonight's program, there will be no more questions. Of course, if you have your theories, you are more than welcome to call in. Share them on the show. Let us know who you think killed Marilyn Monroe, perhaps why they did it. A motive is always helpful. So call in and share your theories as we go through this journey together. But first, news off the top. I don't know if you were watching the show last week, but we got news out of NASA that something exciting was happening on the moon. Something exciting that they weren't ready to tell us about until Monday. Well, Monday came and Monday went. And what news has come from NASA? Well, it seems that there is water on the lit side of the moon. Yes, the moon, the side of the moon that is not featured on the Pink Floyd album, is the side of the moon where we thought it would be less likely to find any sort of water due to both a general lack of oxygen on the moon, but also due to, the fact that it's in direct sunlight almost all the time. They say that first part of the moon, due to a lack of full atmosphere, can be very hot in the sunlit areas, but also very cold on the opposite side of the planet. Well, I guess it's technically not a planet at all, just a moon. Either way, there is water on it. Now, does this mean that there have been creatures on or in the moon consuming this water day and night? And why are we just now discovering this water on the moon? We've had people on the moon before. You think they wouldn't have come across a puddle? You think they wouldn't have drinking some of it themselves? What is so special about this moon water that NASA has waited until now to confirm its existence? If you've got theories, go ahead and send them in to me at strangetipsindeed@gmail.com. That is our tip line. For any time you've got to talk about something and the show's not on the air, send us an email right there. You can also tweet me at strangetindeed on Twitter, or you can send me a message on Instagram at strangetimesIndeed, where you'll find plenty of bonus and supplemental materials for these shows, especially our Who Killed Marilyn series. Every time we do an installment of this series, I have read a chapter live on Instagram Live and saved it on my IGTV profile, so you can go back and revisit the chapters there and get the whole book, the full experience. Before we give you the highlights here on Strange Times Indeed, now let's get rolling into tonight's program. The big focus, the most important night and hour of broadcast history is upon us. The moment in which we conclusively say, who killed Marilyn Monroe? But we're going to have to go through the list of suspects that we've already compiled with the new information given to us in these most recent chapters and see where that leaves us. So let's get going with it. Of course, the Who Killed Marilyn series does come with a content warning. This portion of the show, this entire episode, will involve discussions of murder, suicide, erasures of suicide, cover-ups of murder, all sorts of disgusting and troubling things like that. So if those things are troubling to you, feel free to skip this episode and join us in 2 weeks when we return. We're taking next week off due to, well, I can't think of anything that's happening next week that might put us in a headspace where we don't want to do the show. I'll leave it at that. But tune in 2 weeks. You can call in with any paranormal or unexplained sightings that you've had. We want to hear about them. We want to hear what's going on. But now it's time to get into Who Killed Marilyn. And no better place to start tonight than the end. Tony Sciaca, the author of this book, I think sums things up pretty well at the end of this book, but he never quite comes to a conclusion as to who, in fact, killed Marilyn Monroe. What he writes in the final pages of the book leave a lasting impression on the reader. Enough of the suppressed evidence in the case of Marilyn Monroe has been pried loose by investigators to make it almost an absolute certainty that she had been murdered. But because so much else remains hidden away in the murder file, we can only speculate and propound theories about the motive and identity of her killers. Marilyn Monroe was indeed murdered, and it seems very likely her life was snuffed out as a direct result of her entanglement with Jack and Bobby Kennedy. The Kennedy brothers are dead, of course, perhaps victims of other murders in other conspiracies. But most of the people who know the secrets of Marilyn Monroe's last hours and days, who probably have some information that could point to her killers and who have never been questioned under oath, are still alive. We owe it to Marilyn, to her memory of this woman who meant so much to us when she was alive and who continues to live for us in her films. We owe it to her to correct this awful judgment that she took her own life. For a couple of years now, investigators who have dug behind the cover-up and ripped some of the truth out of those hidden files have been demanding that a Los Angeles grand jury be convened to finally and belatedly seek the real facts about Marilyn's death. Norman Mailer called a press conference in Los Angeles early in 1975 to present his evidence that the autopsy report is falsehood. Hollywood reporters ignored the evidence and practically accused him of trying to create a controversy to sell more copies of his biography of Marilyn. Bob Slatzer had written several letters to the Los Angeles District Attorney and to the grand jury, submitting the evidence he and his investigators have uncovered and asking for legitimate investigations. The responses have been: the Committee for Criminal Complaints has considered your request for further investigation into the circumstances surrounding the death of Marilyn Monroe, and has concluded that there is no necessity in reopening the matter. Inasmuch as the events you question took place 12 years ago, much effort and attention have already been directed to them by officials in whom we have confidence, and there are many contemporary problems demanding attention. We reaffirm our decision not to recommend reopening the matter. Perhaps the grand jury has confidence in the officials who supposedly devoted a lot of time and trouble into an investigation of Marilyn's death, but few others who know the facts have such confidence. There are so many contradictions, distortions, and outright lies in the stories told by those who were involved in Marilyn's death, even if simply as witnesses to minor facets of it, that this case screams out for a new investigation. No doubt it will not be reopened until some Los Angeles official with the guts to admit that there has been a suppression of evidence that the autopsy report is a fraud says it publicly and orders a complete re-examination of the case. By then, it will probably be too late to convict anyone for Marilyn's murder, to hold anyone absolutely responsible for snuffing out her life, but we owe it to her to learn the truth, and we owe it to the American public and to history to learn whether Marilyn's murder was part of an even broader political conspiracy. Now, in the recent episodes of this show, we've talked about how she was murdered. We've talked about the last night of her life. We've talked about all the people who have been entangled with her through the course of her life. And we've plucked out some prime suspects in this case. And they are as follows. And we'll go through them bit by bit. Arthur Miller, her former husband and playwright. Joe DiMaggio, former husband, baseball superstar. The Wronged Wives Club, the wives of any husband that Marilyn Monroe may have slept with, or any husband who left his wife for just a chance with Miss Monroe. And of course, the Kennedys, who could forget JFK and his brother Bobby. And last but certainly not least, the extraterrestrials. Now, that's right, it's hard to consider what Marilyn's life would have been like had she just been a normal human being. But Marilyn Monroe, as detailed in this book, was a cosmic woman with a psychic musk. This is a woman from outer space, a woman with extraterrestrial ties, and she planned to have a press conference right before she was murdered. Perhaps she was planning to disclose all of that for the world. Well, let's get into each and every one of our suspects as we go through and figure out where that leads us and see who it is we think killed Marilyn Monroe. Let's get right into it with our first suspect, a man by the name of Arthur Miller. Arthur Miller comes up a couple of times in early chapters of the book. After all, he was Marilyn's ex-husband, and she divorced him the day that she decided she would be attached in some sexual way to JFK. She gets divorced and she's sitting there in a layover at a Dallas airport on the day of Kennedy's inauguration, the same day she's divorced from Arthur Miller. Watching Kennedy get inaugurated right there on the news, thinking, well, I sure would like me a piece of that. But Arthur Miller, nowhere to be seen in this book from that moment on. Now, of course, this may be troubling to some, but I think it makes almost perfect sense when you consider Arthur Miller as a stilted lover, jealous to find that he was married to Marilyn Monroe and that she would leave him for the President of the United States. Why, Arthur Miller, one of the nation's most respected playwrights, responsible for such pieces as Death of a Salesman, The Crucible, A View from the Bridge, all shows that contain murder and violence. It seems to me that perhaps this Arthur Miller fellow was a little obsessed with murder and violence. And after all, for those of you who are unfamiliar with his work, The Crucible, the story of the Salem witch trials was also a cleverly disguised story about the McCarthy era and 60s, 50s. It was about the Red Scare, hunting down communists, blacklisting them. And if he could subtly tell a secret story through the tale of women being persecuted for witchcraft, then who's to say that Arthur Miller isn't capable of even more worse deceptions? He disappears. He's not even present in this book after the divorce. But maybe that's just how he wants it. Keep as far away from Marilyn as possible until his knowledge of murders, his knowledge of crimes creeps in, and he gets the idea. If nobody sees me, if I'm upset about what Marilyn has done to me, well, I'll just disappear for a while. There's no need for anyone to hear from me. I'm writing a play in New York, and I'm done talking to Marilyn. So he keeps his distance. And then one day in August, he flies down to Los Angeles, sneaks into Marilyn's home, gives her a fatal injection of barbiturates, and flies back away. Now, no one had sighted Arthur Miller that day, but who's to say he didn't creep in through the window? Marilyn was on the phone almost all day. She could have talked to him at any point, perhaps arranged for him to sneak by for one last rendezvous while he was in town. And that's when he did it. Then he slips away and leaves, just like that. Not even a suspect in this book. Incredible work by Arthur Miller, perhaps the best of his career. It's a possibility, but there are other suspects to consider. But let's not forget this one last fact. When Sergeant Clemens, the officer who arrived at the scene at 4 a.m., the one officer who has been steadfast in his belief that this was a murder and in fact not a suicide, noted that Marilyn's body appeared, the whole scene, the whole death scene, appeared to have been staged. Staged. Now that is a curious adjective. Staged? Why, Arthur Miller was a playwright after all. It seems that all he knew throughout his whole career, throughout his whole life, was how to stage things properly. Perhaps it looked too good. Perhaps the suicide was so well staged that it could have only been a fabrication. Now let's keep going. Let's take a look at Joe DiMaggio. Now, Joe DiMaggio was close friends with Marilyn, and the night of her death, Marilyn did receive a phone call from Joe DiMaggio Jr. He called her saying that he was not, in fact, going to be getting married to his fiancée. And Marilyn was overjoyed at this news. Why, she thought Joe DiMaggio Jr. was too young to be getting married. And she was so elated that at the young age of 18, he wouldn't be getting married, that he could meet some other girls, have a good time. That she had a close relationship with the DiMaggios. And in fact, as the book notes right here, on the last page of the photographs, here is Marilyn Monroe's tombstone, and there are the roses that Joe DiMaggio paid to have left at her tombstone twice a week for forever. For forever, well, methinks thou doth protest too much. After all, after Joe DiMaggio and Marilyn divorced the first time, Joe DiMaggio was good friends with a man by the name of Frank Sinatra, and the two of them hooked up, and they said, I need to get back at Marilyn. I don't want her to leave me. This is Joe DiMaggio. And he and Frank Sinatra concoct a plan to catch Marilyn in a compromising position. And they find out that Marilyn is spending the night at a girlfriend's house. A girlfriend? Perhaps Miss Monroe isn't as straight as Mr. DiMaggio. And so they think a big scandal it would have been at the time to catch Marilyn Monroe with a lesbian lover. Now, they're not going to take that straight to the press. No, Joe DiMaggio was at the time considering this a chance to blackmail Marilyn into staying with him. Now, of course, this panned out very poorly. Marilyn was just visiting a friend. Nothing salacious was going on. No evidence was had. But also, when they arrive at the house to bust Marilyn, they show up at the wrong house. They might as well be any other police officer trying to hold a house arrest of some sort. They're just about as incompetent as the police state we live in. And of course, years later, Marilyn and Joe and Frank Sinatra all can laugh about it. But a terrible thing occurred that night where they tried to blackmail her into staying with him. Very troubling indeed. Tried to blackmail her for potentially just being who she was. A bisexual icon. Now, this transgression, of course, they stay friends. But do they really stay friends? I mean, Joe DiMaggio, after all, is a man. The most violent of genders. Anyone who's seen Alien 3 can tell you that. But here's one other clue that might point to our friend Joe DiMaggio as being the culprit here. Now, those of you might be familiar with a little song by a band named Simon and Garfunkel. A song called Mrs. Robinson. And at one point they sing the lyrics, "Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? A nation turns its lonely eyes to you. Ooh, ooh, ooh." Well, why are they so lonely? Perhaps because Marilyn is gone. Perhaps she is not there to take care of them, not there to be a wife or a mother to them. And Joe DiMaggio is now gone as well. Well, where's he gone to? Has he gone into hiding? So bereft at the murder of his ex-wife and best friend that he gets out of the scene, he disappears, and it's not brought to our attention until 1968? Was Paul Simon trying to warn us? Was he trying to say something's fishy here? Something's up with the fact that Joe DiMaggio hasn't been seen in so long that we don't know where he's gone to. Why, it's very likely that he's in hiding after committing the murder of Marilyn Monroe. And who would suspect the man who ordered roses to be placed on her grave twice a week for forever? For forever is a long time, longer than most graves last. Seems a bit overkill, seems a bit like our friend Joe DiMaggio is protesting a little too much. Next on our list, the Wronged Wives Club. Every woman whose husband has left her for Marilyn. Now, of course, this is an untold number of women. This is an untold number of families ruined by Marilyn Monroe because, of course, the key suspects we've noted were all wives of folks who met or knew Marilyn, her first agent, who Marilyn strung along and said she would not marry him. But she also never said Marilyn said he would ask Marilyn frequently if she would marry him. But she never said no, but she never said yes, and strung him along until the day he died, and his wife never forgave Marilyn. Clark Gable's wife never forgave Marilyn, and most certainly one of the most scorned women in American history, Jackie Onassis, furious about John F. Kennedy's happy birthday number. And of course, many men who had seen such films as Some Like It Hot sure did. They sure did like it hot. And they thought, maybe I'll move to Hollywood and meet Marilyn Monroe. There are untold stories of countless men who have left their wives at the sight of this beautiful cosmic sex goddess from beyond the stars. There isn't much evidence pointing to them in these chapters, but there is plenty of evidence pointing to the Kennedys. Evidence that suggests that the Kennedys would have been strongly involved here, and of course Jackie Onassis, a Kennedy in her own right. But we're going to get into the Kennedys. We're going to get into some of our other suspects when we return from the break. I know Stephen's been working hard on his own theories about who killed Marilyn. Stephen, of course, our technical director. We're going to hear from him right after the break. And then we'll break down the rest of this theory on the final episode of our Who Killed Marilyn series. Don't change that dial. We'll be right back.
Is recording. Camera 1 and sound speeds. Ready for your slate. Action.
Take 3.
21 years ago, I came here with Susan B. Anthony, and we came for exactly the same purpose as that for which we are here tonight.
That so far as my right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness was concerned, others must judge for me.
I do not believe that giving the women the ballot is immediately going to cure all the ills of life. I do not believe that white women are dewdrops just exhaled from the skies. I think that, like men, they may be divided into 3 classes: the good, the bad, and the indifferent.
Welcome back, terrestrials. Welcome back to the 4th part of our 4-part bi-weekly series, Who Killed Marilyn? The final installment, where we decide and we uncover who murdered Marilyn Monroe. Of course, you're watching Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister. I, of course, am Cliff McCallister, your host and the czar of the bizarre. Every week on this show, we take your calls to find out what strange and unexplainable things have happened out into the world. But tonight, we're only taking calls about your theories as to who killed Marilyn. Stephen, let's go ahead and post that link just in case anyone has their own pressing theories they'd like to call in and discuss. Of course, this show is dedicated to the Marilyn Ensemble Theater, the only theater with the guts to put us on the air. We are a truth-telling program here at Strange Times Indeed with Cliff McCallister, and the Marilyn Ensemble Theater is a theater that stands for truth. And that's why they give us the airtime to come out here and speak. No one else has the guts to do it, so we dedicate every show to them right now. This Friday, they're wrapping up their own 4-part bi-weekly series, Victory is Within Our Grasp, a collection of monologues from the women's suffrage movement. Just in time for the election, so if you need a break from all the election troubles of the present day, you can enjoy the election troubles from over 100 years ago. Head over to marylandensemble.org/victory to check that one out. And if you'd just like to support the theater any old way, head over to marylandensemble.org/donate. Every donation you make helps keep this show on the air. Now, Stephen, we are getting into our Who Killed Marilyn special, and our good friend, our good technical director, Stephen Craig, has been working on his own theories. Stephen, let's get into it. How is the research going?
The research is going great. I'll have to say that. Really, just want to catch everybody up on my theory about who killed Marilyn. And I was just spitballing whenever this whole thing had started, and it seems like it's an unsolved case. Well, now
that is correct.
I mean, recently,
in fact, the official statement, Stephen,
yes?
is that this is a suicide. But I think anyone who could look at the facts and the evidence of the autopsy scene, the death scene, everything, anyone with a brain can see that this was no suicide.
There are many people who think that it's an unsolved case rather than a suicide. And so there was a documentary that got popular over the summer that I feel like caused me to highlight another suspect. I pointed out Carol Baskin immediately because of Marilyn Monroe's song.
Touch Me Tiger.
Yes, precisely. She sings in a very sexual way, and it comes across as if there are strong feelings of lust for tigers. Now, Marilyn Monroe, being a very popular person and rather wealthy, was able to be with a tiger in a video. And I had found out when I was digging into this theory that Carol Baskin did not like this recent WAP video because there were performers and there were tigers in it and other big cats, but they didn't actually perform together live. They were green screened in, the other big cats. So, and there was a lot of animosity towards those performers from Carol, and it just gives me reason as to why she would hold the grudge for Marilyn in the same vein. And since she couldn't get back at Marilyn in the present day, and we know Marilyn knew too much about extraterrestrials, what had happened was the extraterrestrials had teamed up with Carol Baskin, helped her to either time travel or tap into herself at a very young age in order to get this murder to take place. And hopefully that would have kept the WAP video from happening. But as we know, timelines don't actually work like that. That the WAP video still happened. So now we also know that this is new stuff now. That's the update. The new information that I was starting to dig into JFK, because we know of the relationship that Marilyn Monroe had with JFK, and there's this famous speech that he made, and I don't know if you'll let's see. I'm gonna make sure that everyone could at least hear this, right? Let's see. Okay, so if you had trouble hearing that, what was said was, those who foolishly ride the back of the tiger ended up inside. JFK said this. Could this have been about Marilyn? I think the answer is absolutely. Marilyn obviously wanted to ride that tiger, and ended up inside. Joe Exotic made a very famous song, specifically about how Carol Baskin could have grinded up her husband and fed her husband to the tigers, right? Ended up inside. You know, if you're being fed to the tiger, that's a symbol of death, right? So, I think that's directly what he is talking about and almost threatening.
He's saying, don't get too cocky, girl.
Yes.
And this does really tie in with the way that the Kennedys interacted with Marilyn.
Yeah.
After all, towards the end, before she was fed to the tigers, so to speak, she was threatening to hold a press conference. She was attempting to ride the tigers, that is, the president and the attorney general of the United States.
Yep.
And it's almost as if John F. Kennedy is using this speech to coordinate through time to send a message to Carol Baskin in the future that Marilyn Monroe needs to be knocked out in the past. And she uses her own connections to get back there and prevent it from happening.
Right. Because Kennedys would have also needed Marilyn gone. So the team up is now like a 3-way team up. Yeah, wow.
It's a lot to consider.
Yeah.
Well, Stephen, this is a fascinating more insight that comes in. Whoa! Stephen, did you just subscribe for 3 whole months?
Boom, 3 months right there. Wow.
Now, that is a real treat. Now, look at that. Has anyone looked into whether Carol Baskin owns a DeLorean? That's coming from Barefoot52. It sounds like more research for you, Stephen. Does she own a DeLorean?
I'm on the case.
The popular time-traveling car.
I'm on the case.
Well, Stephen, why don't you look into that? Go ahead and let us know if you find out anything else about her thing as we continue our exploration into Who Killed Marilyn, the final installment of our 4-part bi-weekly true crime series, Who Killed Marilyn? There are only a few suspects left to discuss, and these suspects are perhaps the most suspect of them all. Let's get right into it with the Kennedys, and specifically this quote from Milo Spiriglio. As long as I can get to the page. Now, Milo Spiriglio was the head of the oldest detective agency on the West Coast, and he flatly says the following after years of investigation. Marilyn Monroe was politically assassinated. According to Spiriglio's research, the men who murdered Marilyn had probably slipped into her home that night to recover material that would have embarrassed the Kennedys. Marilyn thought she was creating an insurance policy for herself, Spiriglio says. She had a tape recorder in her bedroom, and she got down a few reels of tape conversations and lovemaking between her and the president and between her and Bobby. She was murdered primarily for those tapes and for her notebook and anything else that may have been around. Isn't Milo the guy from This Is Us? That's not a show I've ever seen. As far as I know, it just features normal, regular, everyday terrestrials, which are great. They are fine in their own right, but there are other things that demand my attention. I do not believe this particular Milo Spiriglio is from This Is Us. And he says right there, plain as day, Marilyn Monroe was politically assassinated, and that alone is reason to look into further details of things that happened following her death. I mean, who could forget Marilyn's own publicist, Pat Newcomb, who seemed to get a cushy job in Washington within a year of the passing of Marilyn Monroe. Here's what the book says. Immediately after Marilyn's funeral, her press agent, Pat Newcomb, who was with Marilyn for hours shortly before she was killed, and who had been invited to the party at Peter Lawford's house, was flown to the Kennedy compound in Hyannisport. She spent a period of her mourning there, and of course, she was isolated from all questions by reporters and writers. Later, after the trip to Europe, she was hired by the U.S. Information Agency as an information specialist in motion pictures. Among the references she gave in her application for the job were Mr. and Mrs. Peter Lawford. The office she was assigned to was conveniently next to Bobby Kennedy's office in the Justice Department building, and when Bobby later ran for Senate seat from New York, Pat Newcomb worked on his campaign headquarters in New York City. The inference has been drawn by investigators that Bobby Kennedy was guaranteeing the silence of those who might be able to tell us something about the events leading up to Marilyn's death, just as his brother Teddy did at Chappaquiddick, when he lied about the night Mary Jo Capenci was drowned in his car as they were driving to a tryst on a lonely beach, and when he got several of his aides and associates to back him up with lies and distortions of the truth. Bobby Kennedy just taking a page out of the Ted Kennedy playbook. But that's not the only odd thing that happened after Marilyn's passing. You see, several investigators, including Norman Mailer's researcher, who spent weeks in Los Angeles trying to get at the core of the truth, and including Sergeant Clemens, report that within hours of Marilyn's death, before it became known to the public, a Marine helicopter touched down on the lawn next to Lawford's house. Bobby Kennedy climbed aboard and was whisked up to San Francisco to rejoin his wife, and to begin the pretext that he had never been nearer than 600 miles from Marilyn at any time during the weekend. Kopechny. Well, I'll tell you what. It's never right to pronounce someone's name wrong, but better than what Ted Kennedy did to her. All right, here we go. Now, so these two pieces of pretty damning evidence are nowhere near the end of the things that occurred involving Bobby Kennedy the night of her murder. And this is all happening after she had spoken to him on the phone or in person earlier that day, depending on which account you believe. You see, Bobby Spindle, a man who worked for Jimmy Hoffa, had been tapping Marilyn Monroe's phone. He was trying to get insight and information about what the Kennedys were up to. So he taps her phone because everyone knows she's with Bobby Kennedy, and then Marilyn Monroe, a little loose-lipped, is bound to talk to her friends about some of these secrets over the phone. So Bobby Spindle taps her phone, and he's been trying to recover a call after he was arrested for various amounts of phone taps. He was trying to recover tapes that were tapes of a call that was placed within hours of the discovery of Marilyn's body, but before authorities were noted. Don't forget there was a 4-hour gap. In the original telling of her murder, Mrs. Murray, who notified police when she spoke to Sergeant Clemens, said that she found Marilyn around midnight, but Sergeant Clemens and the police had not been notified until 4 in the morning. Eventually, they would change their story, but suffice to say, in the first telling of it all, there leaves a 4-hour gap. During the time of this gap, a phone call is placed from Bobby Kennedy's camp, his headquarters up in San Francisco. It's not specifically Bobby Kennedy on the call, but somebody who is working for and has knowledge of Bobby Kennedy, someone who would be near him while he's staying at San Francisco, places a call to somebody in western Los Angeles. It could be Marilyn Monroe's house. It could have been one of Marilyn's friends whose phones had also been tapped. Now, Bobby Spindle refuses to disclose who exactly these phone calls were between, but the most important thing is not who the call was between, but what was said, what was coming from the line in San Francisco. 4 simple words, a simple question, coming in from San Francisco to Los Angeles. Those words, is she dead yet? Yet. Is she dead yet? Now, this is from the book, Is She Dead Yet? Because I believe Tony Sciaca sums it up pretty much perfectly here. Is she dead yet? That could only mean someone who was involved in a plot to murder Marilyn was asking another member of the group whether the murder had been carried out. All reports have it that when her body was found, she'd been dead for many hours. Rigor mortis had set in. Is she dead yet? Someone knew she was scheduled to be killed. It was not possible he had been told earlier that Marilyn was dying, as one might be told, as if she were in an emergency room or slipping away despite all efforts to save her. And yet simply the unfortunate word "yet" had been used to ask about her condition. Yes, if someone's in trouble, you're not waiting for them to be dead yet. You're not waiting for the moment they die. You want to know if they're okay. Is she dead yet? That's the wording of people mixed up in a serious and plotted murder. Now, it's hard to say exactly who did the killing. Was it Bobby Kennedy himself? Likely not. But was it possible that the CIA murdered Marilyn Monroe on Bobby's behalf? Well, I certainly wouldn't rule it out. Because certainly if Bobby Kennedy had passed word to anyone in the CIA involved in the murders and the murder plans, Marilyn would have been killed without much of a thought. Murder, as we have seen from investigations into the CIA, has become almost second nature for some within the government-supported kind of mafia organization called Central Intelligence. Yes, members of the CIA, extrajudicial killings is really their bread and butter. They're out there disrupting entire other countries. They attempted to do it with the Bay of Pigs. They attempted to do it with Castro. They thankfully got overthrown by a popular vote. In one of the countries, they staged a coup in just this past year. It's really all the CIA does. An extra group that goes ahead and kills people and nobody has to know about it or worry about it. And is it possible they did the job for Bobby Kennedy? Well, if I'm dead tomorrow, I think you'll know who's to blame. Now, let's take a look here. Make sure I've got the right things on the notes. Great. All right. Here's the thing. Our good friend, Norman Mailer, doesn't necessarily think that Bobby Kennedy was directly involved with this murder. In fact, he would go on to say, in his own book, "I've always felt it was ridiculous for Kennedy to do it. To risk losing everything, the Kennedys had such a sophisticated awareness of how the press works, that if Marilyn had publicly disclosed her relationship to Bobby, had held a press conference, the Kennedys would have said, in effect, isn't it awful? She's such a fine actress and she's under so much strain and pressure. We have great respect for her talent and there's nothing to the rumors, and the newspapers would have buried it. There's no way Marilyn Monroe would have won that fight." Marilyn Monroe's own threats to the Kennedys would have simply been brushed under the rug. The Kennedys didn't really have to worry about this, so it didn't make sense for Bobby Kennedy to do it. But it's possible people in the Kennedy camp, people who wanted to protect the Kennedys, acted without the Kennedys' knowledge in an attempt to snuff out Marilyn Monroe's life, and thusly bring an end to anything she might be able to do to disrupt the Kennedy campaign, the great Kennedy name. Now, here's what the book says. This is a very important section. The other theory, one of the two I personally lean towards after many months of investigation, is that Marilyn was murdered by people around the Kennedys who wanted to protect them and remove a highly dangerous threat without their knowledge or approval. It isn't too difficult to conceive of some overzealous Kennedy people knowing the boss was greatly upset that Marilyn's risk to his career, compounded by the Spindlehoff attacks, could have come up with the simplest solution: murder the lady and make it look like a suicide. After all, some of the men around Richard Nixon were seriously talking about murdering columnist Jack Anderson because they didn't like the things that he was publishing that made the president look like a liar. The seats of power always draw perverted kinds of people who stop at nothing, not even murder, to protect or enhance that power. I'll say it again. The seats of power always draw perverted kinds of people who stop at nothing, not even murder, to protect or enhance power. They've been doing it all along, and they did it when they killed Marilyn Monroe. They're trying to protect the Kennedy name, and they know, compared to everything that Kennedy has brought them, everything Kennedy has gave them, everything that Kennedy will continue to give them, all hinges on their delusion that Marilyn Monroe is the piece of the puzzle that could bring down the whole thing. They are so afraid of this woman that they go behind the Kennedy's backs and murder her. And of course, these folks who killed her, after all, there's a Hollywood executive who will remain unnamed. This major film executive who is close to CIA business interests in Hollywood has said privately that he was told the CIA came into Marilyn's home and made it sterile. Everything in the house, every cup, every glass, everything that could have connected Marilyn with the Kennedys was cleaned or destroyed, and everything that would have made it look like a suicide was set up so that that would be the verdict. The CIA's in there. They're doing their best job to make it look like they were never there at all, to make it look like a suicide and to protect the Kennedy name. After all, if John F. Kennedy is the president, they're going to do their best to protect him unless they realize he's a socialist or somewhat a little further to the left than they're comfortable with. And if Bobby Kennedy is the head of the Justice Department, they're going to protect their seats of power. So they're going to do the Kennedys a favor. They're going to get Marilyn out of their hair. Now, maybe that's not what the Kennedys want, but maybe the Kennedys don't even realize that's what they need. And so these CIA men are going behind their backs and killing on the behalf of the Kennedys. But the one thing that seems odd about that is why they would feel the need to kill Marilyn Monroe. It all seems so frivolous. Especially if the press would have just buried it. Surely the folks who are in the Kennedy camp would know this, and surely they would talk to the Kennedys. But Norman Mailer posits one other theory, a surprise suspect who may have been responsible here. And I'm going to read this directly from the book because it is so complex. This theory weaves such an incredible web around itself, it's almost hard not to believe it. This brings us directly to the second most viable theory as to who murdered Marilyn. The only other one I feel has as great of plausibility to recommend it. It was first publicly propounded by Norman Mailer, and it is much more Byzantine than the speculation about the plot by the Kennedy men to get Marilyn out of the way. Mailer's guess at a scenario is that a right-wing enclave in the CIA was bitter about the Bay of Pigs and the Kennedys' last-minute decision to pull back American air cover for Cuban invaders attempting to overthrow Castro. So they decided to destroy the Kennedy administration and guarantee that there would be no second term for JFK and his brother. They first plotted to kidnap Marilyn using the West Coast Mafia figures that they had already hired to kill Fidel Castro. But discovering they could not get her alone, they decided to slip into her house and murder her. Then they cleaned the place up so it would look like a suicide for the first several hours. The papers would report it as a suicide at first. And then there would be a dramatic explosion when the police and the coroner reported that what was believed to have been a suicide was actually a murder disguised as a suicide. The Kennedys would naturally be brought into it because the police investigation would certainly turn up all the evidence about Marilyn's affairs with both John and Bobby. All Hollywood knew about those affairs, and it could never have been kept secret from police investigators, and it would have had the underground effect of a Chappaquiddick, Mailer says. Even if it could not be proved that the Kennedys murdered Marilyn to get her out of their hair, the entire country would have believed it, and even loyal Democrats would have been forced to abandon Camelot. But none of that happened because Chief Parker jumped in and bent the investigation so that the suicide verdict was the only possibility. If that is actually what did happen, then the frightening possibility looms large. The right-wing CIA plot to destroy the Kennedys failed. There's no other way, so far as can be seen, to totally discredit the Kennedys that their political careers would be over. All that could possibly be done at that point is, as the CIA has always delicately put it, eliminate John F. Kennedy. Is it possible that a right-wing militia within the CIA had Marilyn Monroe murdered, but staged it to look like a suicide, but a poorly staged suicide, so eventually it would be clearly known to be a murder that could easily be pinned on the Kennedys, and thusly destroying their careers, but when the chief of police, knowing that he might be in line to be the next head of the FBI, bent the story in the Kennedys' favors, ruled it a suicide, and forbid any further investigations? Why, it was at that moment that the right-wing CIA's plan failed. And that set in motion their next plan, a plan to murder the president. Now, that's a whole other can of beans that we're not even getting into, but it's very possible that this was the catalyst. Now, there's one other suspect we haven't discussed tonight, but this suspect is something even broader, something bigger than us all. The extraterrestrials, beings from beyond our planet, beings from the stars, who have come to our world, who perhaps walk among us, disguised as humans, humanoid in their appearance perhaps. But there can be no doubt after reading this book that Marilyn Monroe herself was an extraterrestrial, a cosmic woman with a psychic musk. John F. Kennedy had a thing for her, and he had a thing for her. Why? As this book so delicately put it, language warning, he was a star fucker. That's right. Now, I think everyone watching this show knows what that means. This was a man who was into banging extraterrestrials. He had a bit of a thing for it, and who could blame him? But still, Marilyn Monroe, just that extraterrestrial. And now she's having these rendezvous with the president. And now the president's not taking her calls. The president's brother isn't taking her calls. She wants some attention, and she's not getting it. And by God, you don't not give Marilyn Monroe some attention. So she's going to hold a press conference. She starts making threats. She's going to tell people about everything she's heard about Bobby Kennedy and John F. Kennedy. And I was doing some extra research into her, and I uncovered this incredible clip. This is coming from a documentary called Unacknowledged, from the Orchard Films. Let's roll this clip. Get ready, because this is going to blow your socks off for those of you watching at home. Whoa. Hold on.
Interestingly, there was a man on my executive committee. He was a very well-known actor and singer named Burl Ives. And Burl Ives, he was a 33rd degree Mason. So all of you people who think that all these secret societies, everyone in it knows everything, they don't know anything. And he said,
sorry, technical difficulties on the device.
It's Twitch and Verizon trying to hold down the truth.
That's right. I'm getting random app notifications in the middle of this important broadcast, and they're coming in from all over the world. They're trying to suppress the truth. It's a common occurrence here on Strange Times Indeed that we have been attempted to be silenced by those who seek to suppress the truth, perhaps by the current members of the Kennedy family.
I couldn't even screen capture this particular video to put it in my OBS earlier.
That's right. There are things that people don't want us to know about. but we're telling the truth here on Strange Times Indeed. Now, enjoy this clip. I think it's really going to blow your minds.
Interestingly, there was a man on my executive committee. He was a very well-known actor and singer named Burl Ives. And Burl Ives, he was a 33rd degree Mason. So all of you people who think that all these secret societies, everyone in it knows everything, they don't know anything. And he said to me, he says, we all know that Marilyn Monroe didn't die of an overdose. Boop, boop-be-doo. He said, do you know why they killed Marilyn?
This president, the late Marilyn Monroe.
And I said, well, I didn't until I got this document. It's a virtual death warrant because she was found a couple of days later. 3 August 1962, wiretap of telephone conversations between reporter Dorothy Kilgallen, who was looking into Roswell and other UFO issues, and her close friend Howard Rothberg, from wiretap of telephone conversation of Marilyn Monroe and Attorney General Bobby Kennedy. Rothberg discussed the apparent comeback of the subject with Kilgallen and the breakup with the Kennedys. This is referring to the fact that Marilyn Monroe had been having an affair with not one but both Kennedy brothers, and it was becoming conspicuous, so they broke it off. Rothberg indicated in so many words that she had secrets to tell, no doubt arising from her trysts with the president and the attorney general. One such secret mentions the visit of the president at a secret air base for the purpose of inspecting things from outer space. Now, this is 1962. Kilgallen said that if the story is true, it would be a terrible embarrassment for Jack and his plans to have NASA put men on the moon.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The subject repeatedly called the Attorney General and complained about the way she was being ignored by the president and his brother. The subject threatened to hold a press conference and would tell all. It's a tragic situation because she was an actress. She didn't understand the national security state and the viciousness of those who want to keep these sort of secrets.
Do you hear that? Marilyn Monroe, the cosmic woman with the psychic musk, had knowledge of interactions with Kennedy and extraterrestrials, going to look into this space thing. Well, this space thing was something Kennedy was deeply looking into. After all, we all know about that crazy thing he had for Marilyn. We all know the term. And so is it possible that in holding a press conference, Marilyn Monroe would have revealed to the world that she was an extraterrestrial and that she had been sleeping with the president and the attorney general, not only pushing out disclosure and blowing the cover of other extraterrestrials on the planet, but going out there and making it known that the president was sleeping with folks not only from another country, but from another galaxy? Why, it's near treason. It's not only would it have ruined the Kennedys, but it would have broken any sense of normalcy that the extraterrestrials had. It would have ruined their deep cover investigations into what's actually happening on this planet. It's troubling indeed to think. But I think it's very possible that Marilyn Monroe was murdered by these very same extraterrestrials. Perhaps working with Carol Baskin, who's sending messages back, as disclosure is happening right now in our time, and is keeping an eye to make sure everything happens according to schedule. But if there's a blip in the timeline, if information gets out earlier about the existence of extraterrestrials before they're ready, before it's time, it could be bad news. It could be very bad news. But if we wait, and if it comes out on the right time, after all, these extraterrestrials exist on a different linear plane than our own. They may know precisely when the right president to find out about this is in office. And they're kind of waiting for full disclosure until that moment. But if Marilyn Monroe lets it go earlier, there's no going back. The extraterrestrials exist, and they've been sleeping with the president. So of course, Marilyn Monroe murdered by her own kind for the own good of their species and the own good of our own planet. Stephen, I wonder, is it too late to put up a poll? I'd like to put up a poll here.
we are able to put up a poll.
If you're watching on Twitch tonight, we're going to put up a poll because we want to hear from you, the viewer, who you think killed Marilyn Monroe.
You've got 3 minutes.
3
And
minutes, go ahead.
we have extra bit votes and extra channel point votes.
So there's extra. You can vote twice if you want. You've got the points to do it. We want to know who you think killed Marilyn Monroe. Was it the Kennedys? Was it Arthur Miller? Was it Joe DiMaggio? Were it the wronged wives or were it the extraterrestrials? Go ahead and vote. Vote on out there. Once it's out, you can't put the extraterrestrial back in the bag. That's right, Butterscotch Bonnet. Butterscotch Bonnet, subscribe to our channel tonight. Thank you so much for joining the fun here on twitch.tv/MetComedyNight. Every Thursday, we host this show, Strange Times Indeed, with myself, Cliff McCallister, the Czar of the Bazaar. And every week, we take your calls as to what you think, what unexplained things are happening out in the world. What have you witnessed? Have you witnessed an extraterrestrial, a ghost, a specter, an interdimensional being, a cryptid, a Mothman, a Sasquatch? Call in any Thursday at 9 o'clock because we want to hear about it. Now, next Thursday on the show, we are taking the week off. We've been going nonstop since the start of September. So we're going to give ourselves a little break after we get past the holiday season. So be sure to tune in 2 weeks from now when we return with our normal paranormal programming. We want to take your calls and hear what's been happening. Now, of course, Halloween is right around the corner. Go ahead and follow me on Instagram at Strange Times Indeed. This Saturday, we are going to be watching a movie together on Instagram Live on my own Instagram feed. We haven't decided on the movie yet. There's a poll in my stories. It might still be there, but we're going to post another one. Current front runners for our Saturday night viewing are Ghostbusters and 1990's The Witches. Now, Ghostbusters is a very good pick, but I'm concerned because it's not on any major streaming platform right now. And it'd be nice to have one that we know the viewers will have a pretty easy access to. But go ahead, tune in, follow me there. We'll do a fun Instagram viewing watch along together, and you can watch a spooky movie on Halloween with me, Cliff McCallister, the Czar of the Bazaar. Perhaps we'll even take some calls that night on Instagram as well. Perhaps you have some thoughts on the movies we're watching. All right, the poll is almost wrapped up, and it seems to currently be a tie between the Kennedys and the extraterrestrials. Could there be a tie-breaking vote in the next minute, or will it be a 50-50 tie? If it's a 50-50 tie, then I'm going to have to make the say. Because here's the thing. We're solving this murder tonight. We're not stretching it out any further. There's no more time. We are not getting a grand jury investigation anytime soon. Despite our repeated tweets from our viewers to the president, I know those of you watching have been doing it, tweeting at our president saying we need a grand jury investigation into Marilyn Monroe's murder. And he's not doing it. I figured he was our best shot as a leader to do something like that at a time like this. But he's not taking the bait. So it could be years before a grand jury investigation, and I think that's a damn shame. So you, the viewers, are our grand jury tonight. And tonight, here on Strange Times Indeed, we are holding the Kennedys and the extraterrestrials charged guilty in the murder of Marilyn Monroe. Now, of course, this is a show on a comedy network. Twitch.tv/MetComedyNight to be precise. A channel that does silly improv shows every couple of weeks, and this show every week. And some people might say, hey, now if they're doing this thing on a comedy channel, are they making fun of Marilyn Monroe and poking fun at the death, the murder of a very real woman? No. Here at Strange Times Indeed, we have full respect, full reverence for all of our suspects, all of our subjects, and our suspects as well. After all, innocent until proven guilty. But we will prove you guilty on this very program, mark my words, if you're a suspect in any of these investigations. And so, we treat these things with respect, and we treat Marilyn Monroe with respect. This is our first true crime series on the show. We usually talk about the strange and the bizarre, as we've discussed. But Marilyn holds a special place in our heart, and her murder is something we must solve. And, well, tonight we did. And over the course of this 4-part series, you, me, everyone who's called in, our technical director, Stephen Craig, the Maryland Ensemble Theater, has all been complicit in solving the murder of Marilyn Monroe. And for that, I could not be more proud, but we cannot forget everything that Marilyn gave to us, everything that Marilyn did. And so we ask all of you tonight, those of you at home, go ahead and light a candle tonight for Marilyn Monroe, a cosmic woman with a psychedelic musk, a sex goddess, a woman who we all love and respect. Light that candle. Go ahead, take out your flames, light that candle, and light it for Marilyn Monroe. Goodbye, Norma Jean. Though we never knew you at all, it's clear you didn't kill yourself. Did the Kennedys cause your downfall? You piss off the CIA, and you fought with Bobby Kay. You wanted to tell the world how you came from outer space. And it seems to me you lived your life till you were murdered in your bed. A rogue squadron from the CIA likely did you in. And I know we'll solve your murder before we reach the end. This 4-part series on strange times indeed. Who killed Marilyn? Is she dead yet? The hottest question anyone could ask when innocently calling on the night you passed away. And even when you died, it seems 4 hours had gone by between Mrs. Murray discovering you and her call to the authorities. And it seems to me a grand jury should investigate your death. Not a single soul spoke under oath after they did you in. And I know we'll solve your murder before we reach the end. This 4-part series on strange times indeed. Who killed Marilyn? Goodbye, Norma Jean. Though we never knew you at all, it's clear you didn't kill yourself. Did the Kennedys cause your downfall? Goodbye, Norma Jean, a cosmic woman from outer space. Perhaps depression is more nuanced than feeling sad every single day. But it seems to me Bobby Kennedy was responsible for your death. Plus the CIA and the extraterrestrials who did you in. And I'm glad we solved your murder before we reach the end. This 4-part series on strange times indeed. Who killed Marilyn? 4-part series on strange times indeed. Who killed Marilyn? Stay strange, terrestrials.